Bona tarda a tothom i benvinguts al MACBA. És per mi un plaer i un honor tenir aquí a la Francesca Albanese i a Isabel Valli com a part del projecte 108 Days. I don't know where is Lydia Ourahmane. Hola Lydia, can you stand up or is too much to ask? If you want, otherwise people can meet her around. This is her, the reason why we are all here. 108 Days, com sabeu, deia que volia agrair a la Lídia sobretot l'oportunitat que tenim de tenir aquí a la Isabel Valli, una col·laboradora estreta d'ella, en què van treballar com a mínim a Tassali, no? a l'Escolter Center, i que vosaltres vau poder veure durant el Festival Loop a Còrdoba. I deia que era molt important per nosaltres agrair el seu projecte, la seva generositat i les converses que han mantingut amb la Hiwai Chu, la nostra cap d'exposicions, i amb el Guim Camps, que és coordinador d'exposicions, però també comissari d'aquesta... Tot bé?
She doesn't have the translation
okay.
device.
Do you mind if I do it in English? I can do it in English.
No. Haces el catalán, no. Los colonizadores no se pueden.
No se puede. Reivindiquemos nuestro espacio descolonizado fent servir el català en aquest stage. Com deia, molt important la conversa, no? I la generositat de la Lídia i el treball que han fet. Moltes gràcies. Gràcies. I el treball que han fet amb les nostres companyes, també amb l'Ester Fernández, que porta tota la coordinació, perquè durant 108 dies, una versió expandida del que és el context de la ciutat de Barcelona, una ciutat en la que la Lídia ha viscut des del 2021, es presenti al Museu en un espai buit, al Núvol, que com ja sabeu és la proposta que va decidir fer ella, és de transformar l'espai del museu, invitant a d'altres col·lectius i individus a venir a transformar la nostra dramatúrgia del museu, diguéssim, però també a omplir el museu d'altres referències, d'altres comunitats, d'altres imaginaris. Volia també ressaltar l'obra un dels primers dies, que va ser el que vam tenir a la Samira Badran, i que va ser una de les poder més punyents i més doloroses presentacions i que tenen molt a veure amb el que estem parlant avui, com va ser la lectura, no són números només, va ser la lectura dels noms i les edats de la gent que a aquelles alçades, al novembre, el 2 de novembre, a principis de novembre, perdó, de l'any passat ja havien mort a causa d'aquest principi en aquells moments de massacre, de genocidi. I volia posar el focus també en el que estem fent com a programes en el projecte que farem properament, que comissaria la Maria Berríos i el Isabel Gabaldón, dos dels nostres companys, que també té a veure amb tota la possibilitat de trobar solidaritat, de trobar moments d'enunciació per a aquestes minories sense veu, a través d'una noció d'agència col·lectiva que el museu porta treballant i que portarà treballant en el futur. No vull parlar massa més, només dir que teníem davant de nosaltres, com deia abans, la Francesca Albanese, que com sabeu és relatora especial de la ONU per als Territoris Palestins Ocupats i que ens parlarà de la seva experiència i que ens oferirà un examen de la situació a Palestina. També tenim a la psiquiatra i neurocientífica Isabel Valli, que és experta sobretot en mecanismes cerebrals vinculats i associats al risc de la psicosi, però que també forma part d'alguns reclams polítics que es fan des del món de la cultura, des del món de l'art. I ara, sense més, us deixo amb elles. Us agrairia un aplaudiment i una rebuda calorosa a aquestes dues meravelloses intel·lectuals. També dir que parlaran durant 45 minuts i que hem decidit deixar també mitja hora per la vostra intervenció i per les vostres preguntes, i en així estarem Plegats una hora i mitja. Moltes gràcies per la vostra presència, moltes gràcies Lídia, 108 dies al MACBA i ara amb Francesca Albanese i Isabel Valli.
Thank you, Elvira, for your kind introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Francesca, for being with us tonight. Many of you will probably be already very familiar with Francesca's work because over especially the last 100 and plus days, she has helped us understand what is happening in Palestine through the lens of international law and international humanitarian law. But maybe we can start explaining what exactly is your role.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much. Hola, todo el mundo. It's really a pleasure to be here in Spain and to be here in Barcelona. Sorry, can you hear me? So, a special rapporteur of the United Nations is a voice, first and foremost, a voice for human rights. And a friend of mine, the special rapporteur on the right to health, who's from South Africa, Tlaleng Mofokeng, once told me, we are first and foremost human rights defenders. And it's something that gave me courage and gave sense to what I was already doing, because I met her 6 months into the mandate. The role of a special rapporteur is, first of all, we are appointed, 50 of us are appointed by the Human Rights Council of the United Nations to monitor human rights situations and report to the United Nations, to the Human Rights Council and General Assembly. Now, most of us report on themes, thematic issues, freedom of expression, the prevention of torture, and right to food, right to health. Then there is a very small number of us, the very discriminated against ones, who also report on country issues. Iran, Myanmar, and the occupied Palestinian territory. So this mandate has been around for 30 years now, and I'm the first woman serving in this position. And when I came into the role, I was following very enlightening and enlightened people like John Dugard, who's now is South African, is a South African international law professor, someone who's known in South Africa for his being part of the anti-apartheid movement. Richard Falk, who's an American Jew, and then Michael Link, who's a Canadian, all academics. And then there's me. And I knew that I wanted to continue on their path of telling the truth, being, for those of you who are familiar with Palestinian scholar Edward Said's immense legacy, I'm really attached to this function of storyteller, like telling the truth. I knew that I wanted to tell the truth, meaning the facts, but I'm a jurist, so through legal qualifications. But I also, more than them or different from them, I knew since the beginning that my role couldn't be confined to the United Nations. So what would I write my reports for? Politicians who've been there forever and tolerated 56 years of occupation, not talking of what had preceded, not talking of what had befallen the Palestinian people since, for the past 100 years. So I said, no, I need to talk to the people. So I need to make this mandate really popular. Popular, not just known, but the concept, the findings of my work need to be brought to the people, because we need to shift the narrative. This is something Palestinians in particular, and I salute all of you who are Palestinians in the audience, and I also salute any Israelis, there are not many, but any Jewish people. I know that it's very difficult for all of you, and some of the things I'm going to say might be hurtful, but we need to acknowledge and embrace what's happening and why it's been happening. So again, this is why since the very beginning, I knew that I would engage with communities, I would engage with Jewish communities, Palestinian communities, not only in the occupied Palestinian territory, in Israel and abroad, and with the press, with the social media has been one of my channels. I didn't even have a Twitter account before being a special rapporteur. I do, and it's a way to help shift the narrative. So my main role remains that of being a voice from the United Nations, because I'm recognized as an expert in the United Nations to talk about what's happening in the occupied Palestinian territories, Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, but try to break that glass ceiling that prevents truth to be known. Voilà.
Maybe to start, you can explain what is the legal status of Palestinians, thinking in terms of occupation, apartheid measures, just to put in context the recent events that clearly didn't start with the 7th of October attacks.
No, definitely. I seriously have an issue with those who think of the 7th of October as the beginning of the war. First of all, I'm even not at ease with talking of what's happening as a conflict. Of course, it's a conflict because there are weapons involved. There are bombs. There is artillery. There is you know what's going on, but the context matters always, and in this case in particular. So without condoning and without downplaying the harm that has been done to Israeli civilians, which was huge, and I do understand from a humane point of view what, and it's more necessary to say that in Europe, I understand what Jewish people around the world might have felt on the 7th of October. Because it's true that these people have been persecuted and discriminated for centuries. And I'm really glad to have this discussion with a psychiatrist, because we were discussing on how before right now of how trauma changes our way of functioning, our biology, our DNA, and she's better suited than me to comment about that. But I understand why they felt so shattered by this. But if you understand what was caused to Israeli civilians on the 7th of October, then can you relate to the people in Gaza who just before the 7th of October and just during 16 years of blockade has suffered 5 major wars which had killed 5,300 people, 5,300 lives erased from Earth, 1,200 of whom were children. Well, I'm not saying that justifies this, but if that doesn't justify the 7th of October, can we understand that the 7th of October cannot justify what's happening now? And this is critical. So this is why the context matters. It's difficult to talk about the context from the legal status of the Palestinians, because there are myriads of statuses associated with the Palestinians wherever they are. But the basic thing for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with history is that there was a people living in Palestine where Israel was created, and many of them were kicked out of their homes, of their land in 1947-49. 750,000 of them were made refugees. They lost everything, and this was also the dismemberment of a nation. And then the Palestinians, somewhat miraculously, in my view, have managed to regather as a political force, as a collective, investing on education. I'm really impressed by the way they have resisted to history. But still, so now there are millions, 7 million of refugees. There are Palestinians in the diaspora, and I imagine many of them are here in Spain, here tonight. But so those who are under occupation live under what I say cannot be described otherwise than a military dictatorship, because Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory has operated as a military dictatorship, ruling through military law written by soldiers, applied by soldiers, reviewed in military courts by soldiers. And look at it from the perspective of a child, the generations of children who go through military court, because they are arrested and detained as young as 12. And there are 13,000 kids just from 2005 who have been arrested and detained. This is so violent, but it's the very nature of the occupation which is violent, because the occupation the occupation is not illegal in international law, but it's to be justified by military necessity. What is the military necessity of maintaining an occupation for 56 years? Of course, it's apartheid by default, because it's military rule for the Palestinians, and then it's a civil Israeli law for those who shouldn't be there in the first place. The Israelis who live as settlers in the colonies, the 300 colonies that Israel has created in the occupied Palestinian territory since the beginning of the 1967. So the status from the legal point of view is very weak, because they are, from an international point of view, and no offense, but they're stateless. So there is no state to protect them, which doesn't mean that the state of Palestine doesn't exist, but doesn't exist as free. It was born in captivity, and it's not enough to protect the Palestinian citizens. In fact, last year you saw many pogroms against Palestinian villages, and no Palestinian authority to protect them. This is the sense. This gives you the sense of how vulnerable the Palestinians are. So, and then we will have interrupt me if I talk too. But so those in Gaza, since the very beginning of the occupation, have been completely separated. Why so? Because 75% of the Palestinians in Gaza are not even from Gaza. They're from modern-day Israel. So if there is one place where they should return, it's modern-day Israel. And then there are the Palestinians from in the West Bank, whose land is sort of taken hectare by hectare, dunum by dunum, house by house, under the eyes of the international community, who continues to remind that it's against international law. So do something. Because international law, I'm telling you, international law has a lot of measures that must be taken to stop all this, and it has never been attempted. And then there is Jerusalem, which is even considered as part of Israel, by Israel, but it's not recognized, and it shouldn't be recognized because this is legal. So it's an occupation which operates against international law, so it's unlawful, and a regime of oppression, of apartheid, because of course it's apartheid, it's violent and generates violence. This is historical. And so what's happening today, it's absolutely shocking, and at the same time is not surprising, but from both sides. First of all, because violence generates violence, so I was surprised because I was expecting some more armed resistance from the West Bank. So seeing that breach of the blockade, because Gaza has been also under blockade for 16 years, was woof, that's huge. And then I felt it would be horrendous, whatever would follow. But at the same time, a settler colonial presence has an element of violence that is not just violence, it's eliminatory in nature. The Palestinians' presence is not compatible with what Israel wants to do in that land, and this is critical. And this is where our quasi-democracies in the West are not ready to act upon.
Moving to, let's say, the latest development in terms of international law, the recent hearing at the International Court of Justice. Can you talk us through the possible outcomes and what is their likelihood?
Yeah. Do you allow me to describe a little bit what has happened on the 7th of October and after? Because this gives a sense, just to bring all of us on the same page and to understand the value of what South Africa has done in light with the horror, with the inferno that is Gaza today. And every day there is something more that comes out. There are no international journalists in Gaza. So everything we know is either from the United Nations people. I've worked for UNRWA before, and I've left UNRWA because it was unsustainable for me to live in Palestine. At the time, apartheid was not even recognized, and the legality of occupation was not even it was in 2017 because my predecessor said occupation is illegal. Jesus, it took 40 years to 45 years to denounce 50 years to denounce the illegality of the occupation. But however, there are people in UNRWA, internationals like me, who have not left Gaza as of the 7th of October, who are there with the Palestinians. And I need to acknowledge that because it's not a given, but there are the Palestinians who are telling us what's happening. And just for this, in Spain, you seem to have, compared to our country, you seem to have good journalists who at least tell what's happening. But what I want to say is that everyone is using the images of Gaza, and I feel really ashamed as a European, as part of the Western society, to see people smearing or blaming the Palestinians based on the account that these people are passing through the world. You are using their work and you don't even acknowledge them, and the fact that 117 journalists have been killed give us the measure of what's happening in Gaza. But however, on the 7th of October, Hamas broke the siege, and broke the siege in a very violent way, because it didn't just hit military bases, it hit Israeli society. It killed civilians, foreigners, it injured thousands, and it took hostages, 240 hostages. Now, touching civilians in a whatever situation, an armed conflict, but also resistance. The right to resist is recognized as international law. So a people who's oppressed has the right to resist. One thing is to say that at the time of decolonization, where Africa was breaking the chains of Western control and domination. Another thing is to say that in the post 9/11, right, where everything that is a bit insurgent, it's terrorist. But so there were crimes that Hamas or whomever joined Hamas committed. So I said, okay, there should be a response. Clearly, Israel has the right to protect itself, its territory, its citizens, but it is to do that in line with international law. Instead, what Israel has done is to invoke a right to self-defense under international law that it cannot claim. And I'm very sure about that. And it cannot be, and indeed, as you, well, we will talk about the ICJ, but they didn't use that argument because it cannot be used. Because in the right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter is the right to use force not authorized by the Security Council, and only for a few reasons. One reason, when it's under an attack or an imminent threat of attack, and it cannot be used against the population under occupation. So the International Court of Justice, who interprets international law, had already cleared that Israel faces threats, security threats emanating from the occupied territory, but it cannot wage a war against the people there. Still needs to respond in line with international law. This is not what Israel has done. Instead, Israel has waged a war against the people in Gaza. And 108 days later, what has happened is it has used prohibited weapons, heavy bombardment against Gaza, which is 365 square kilometers, where 2.3 million people lived cramped and besieged. It's a ghetto. People couldn't leave from Gaza. I mean, I spoke with children last year who were saying, oh yeah, but she was sick. She could go to Jerusalem to get cured, to get treatment. She could see the mountains. She was sick. Good for her. Can you believe a child saying that? So the situation in Gaza was horrible in many respects, which doesn't mean that they were all poor and depleted, because now I hear people say, yeah, but there were buildings, there was life, there were beaches. Yeah, what do you think? This was a fully developed society before the occupation, including during the occupation and including during the blockade. But 95% of the water was not drinkable. 80% of the population relied on aid. So it was already bad enough. But now 24,000 people have already been killed. 70% of them were children and women. 10,000 kids have been killed. Now think, to put things in proportion, in Srebrenica, 1,000 men and young men, so adults and young men, were killed. This number is overcome just by the kids who have been killed in Gaza. And then there are 9,000 people who are missing, so probably still under the rubble or rotting, decomposing somewhere, because Israel has ordered the evacuation of North Gaza. So 1.4 million people were ordered out, were ordered to leave. This is not normal. Even if there is a legitimate self-defense, you cannot kick out 1.4 million people saying, if you don't go, you're a terrorist. No, it doesn't work this way. And they did manage to evacuate most of the people in Gaza. And I'm really scared for those who are still in the north, because there is no aid, nothing that reaches north of Gaza. But even those who were displaced, Israel has thrown 200 bombs in safe areas. It has declared in safe zones, so areas that were safe. 200. So why do you bomb 200 times safe zones? Why do you declare a full blockade of water, food, fuel, medications, while you are heavily bombing? And for the first 2 weeks, there were 6,000 bombs thrown on Gaza every week. 200-pound bombs, which have made craters in Gaza. Bombing a refugee camp, Jabalia camp, because there was one person who was a Hamas. First of all, you need to demonstrate that he has done something. It's not, how can we believe you? So everything, look, they've lifted all restraints. They have used international law as a handbook to follow what they could do negative side, meaning they have violated international law through and through, starving people. Now there are 0.5% of the population who's starving. They don't have food, they don't have water. The level of malnutrition it's incredible. And not only those who do not have food and cannot nourish themselves, but pregnant women. The level of miscarriage in Gaza, and it was already very high before the 7th of October, has raised of 300%. They don't have, again, those of you who have kids know that during pregnancy we need to eat more and we need to drink more. They cannot do that. The kids who are malnourished will have an impact and all through their life. And there was already an impressive level of stunting in Gaza. What is this? It's a monstrosity, and this is why I said this is the monstrosity of our century. It's a genocide in the making, and it's shocking that the international community has not acted upon it. And while the focus is on Gaza, in the West Bank, where there is no Hamas military presence, over 350 Palestinians have been killed, 4,000 Palestinians have been arrested and detained. The level of torture is unspeakable. The cruelty against the Palestinians is unspeakable. 20 villages have been just people packed up and left because, settler violence has increased. That's the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory.
Yeah, so considering the
ICJ.
scale of the war on Gaza, one can help to think that the intention is to maximize casualties, maximize destruction, and to make it impossible for Palestinians to live there. And this is paired, as you said, with an escalation in terms of military and settler colonial violence in the West Bank. So is a current Israeli government seeing this as an opportunity to make a great push in terms of the expansionist project?
And here is where I think that the added value can be brought by people who know the history of what has happened to the Palestinian people. Because I said since the very beginning, it was the 5th day, on the 12th of October, I said, This is a clear instance of ethnic cleansing of massive proportions, because the Palestinians have experienced an ethnic cleansing at the hand of Israel, since even before Israel was created as a state, 1947, 1949, as I said, 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced, made refugees. In 1967, 350,000 Palestinians were kicked out, expelled, never allowed to return as well from the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. So my point was, under the fog of war, Israel does this, pushes out the Palestinians, pushes the Palestinians out now even from that small pieces of land, the 22% of the land they belong to, and which is recognized by the international community as the place where they can have a state. And why did I say so? Because I could hear, first of all, I'd heard of the Egyptian solutions before the 7th of October, pushing the Palestinians out. Why? Because it was a demographic bomb. It has always been a demographic bomb for the Israelis, the Gaza Strip in particular. And it's been said. I mean, I remember there was an Israeli former ambassador saying, "But they can go to the Sinai. We'll give them tents and then houses and schools and water and food, and they will have everything they need. We will help them." And of course, no, because the Palestinian, and again, I remember at the beginning I said humanitarian corridors, and then the Palestinians from Gaza with the small electricity, they had say, "Can you please not say that? We will not move. We will not. I mean, we don't want to be moved. This is the small. Even the person who told me that is a refugee himself. And I said, even this small piece of land that remains. This is the last part of Palestine that we are left with. We don't want to go." But it's difficult when you have kids, and when, I mean, I often give this figure because the brutality of what's going on is lost in the data and just the numbers. 1,000 kids amputated without anesthesia. I mean, and this is just one of the things, the destruction of all, 70% of the schools and universities have been destroyed. Most of the hospitals have been either destroyed or severely damaged. There is no possibility to live in Gaza, and this is why people are talking of genocide, because genocide is not just killing people with machetes. Genocide is the killing, is the infliction, is the intent to kill, the intent to destroy a people in full or in part through various acts that can be killing, but you can also have genocide without killing. Think of the Aboriginal Australian, the native Australians. I mean, they were destroyed as a people through economic measures and the taking of the kids. So there was no real extermination through killing. So, but you can inflict severe physical or mental pain, psychological pain, or creating conditions that will make life impossible. And this is one of the categories of the crime of genocide, that it's like they had an intent built in, because if you do with knowledge, if you destroy with knowledge everything that would make life impossible, the intent emerges. And this is, I think that Israel, and they say that somewhat, South Africa, which has brought a case before the International Court of Justice, has been so courageous and so it's beautifully shocking. I mean, I had the first smile since the 7th of October without sense of guilt. You know what I mean? And I said, oh my God, it's so beautiful to see. And as I wrote it, African women and men who have survived 300 years of colonization and 50 years of apartheid, and they stand there proud defending another people who's under colonization, who's been under colonization and under apartheid and now is facing a genocide. It's so telling. Even if the world will continue to be rotten as it is, this will make history. Yeah, it's difficult to console the Palestinians who are going through this thing. This is but again, it's a beginning. Also because I think Palestine is a paradigm to understand the world in a way. The dynamic between the global south and the global north, the west and the rest. I was talking to Spanish politicians these days who are very proud of being a progressive party. Progressive force was said, no, es una matanza. Y entonces, qué es bueno que lo ha dicho, pero poi, ¿qué haces? What are you doing? Because international law was already there saying that you shouldn't treat Israel as normal because it's a colonizer, because it's occupying illegally the Palestinian territory, which remains them. Let's not even talk about historical justice and Palestinian refugees. Okay, let's focus on the OPT, on the occupied Palestinian territory. But what are you doing? Are you suspending relations with Israel? We are not selling armies. Okay, I want to know if you are buying weapons. Are they buying weapons? This is the thing that you need to know. And you need to hold them accountable because they are your progressive government. And the other thing, why the heck Spain doesn't join the International Court of Justice proceedings initiative? No, but we will abide by what the court say. Yeah, but this is not a courtesy. This is international law because the decisions of the International Court of Justice are binding. You cannot sell your graciousness as you do, because you would do the bare minimum. What are you doing today to stop the genocide in Gaza? And this is what you must ask this government. Well, I know that's not very well. I know that the Catalonia is difficult, but it's still your government, your national government. So they need to respond to this, progressive as they are.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I saw that at the hearing at the International Court of Justice. The Israeli legal team asked not to be submitted to provisional measures and to simply rely on verbal assurances for the safety of civilians. But considering the ongoing manipulation of information from the Israeli authorities, and in a way also the level of minimization of the humanitarian crisis by the legal team themselves, can they be even given the benefit of the doubt?
Well, first of all, I'm not trying to avoid the question, but first of all, I find puzzling that in the West, TV programs and have given the floor to Israeli military leaders or commanders to tell what was going on. Just to bring a parallel in, whom did you learn about the Ukrainian war? The Russian commanders? No. So I was shocked when I heard, I can't remember his name, but there was someone who was interviewed, an Australian Israeli, who was questioned why they had left the prisoners in Gaza naked. Because it's hot, it's the Middle East, you know. Now, the fact that you can say this thing in the West and not be questioned and not be kicked out of the program, not be insulted and say this is so inhuman, is because somewhat that that level of dehumanization is part of who we are. Because I keep on saying we should learn from what we have done to the Jewish people to understand what we do to people from the South, people who are not white. And the level of dehumanization that is that goes with the way we deal with this crisis reminds me of what led to the Holocaust. It's not about making parallels between the Holocaust and what's happening in Gaza, but a genocide is a genocide. And the genocide is a process, and it's not an act. And it's possible when the other has been dehumanized to a point that it's not seen anymore as human, as worth of protection. And this is what we have done to the Palestinians. But again, the Palestinians epitomize what we do to people who do not look like us. And think of refugees. Refugees from Ukraine have been welcome, have been hosted in our countries, in our schools, embraced in our system. I do remember the scenes of people waited on and received with hot chocolate and small dolls for the kids. Wonderful. This is what humanity is, and this is what you do for refugees, because it's very heavy to be a refugee. I'm never being a refugee, but I do understand it. This is humanity, right? It's empathy, not sympathy. It's empathy. You feel when you see a tragedy, you feel it. You feel it inside yourself, and you say, I need to help the person because I sacrifice a little bit of what I have so that that person doesn't need to sacrifice everything. And then look at really 100 kilometers down the border with Ukraine, other peoples were left to live, to die in cold, persecuted, beaten by the police, kicked out. Why? Because they were Muslim, because they were dark skin, the dark complexion. So we are racist. Let's admit, we need to process this. We need to embrace the fact that, as Omar Barghouti says, I don't want to appropriate things that wonderful concept that are not mine. 500 years of colonialism have left a huge imprint in our DNA. And therefore, we do not recognize our racism, but it's the lens through which we look at the world, we look at the other. So the Palestinians, Palestinian bodies, we are so used to see them slaughtered. We can't hear the cry of the mothers, the cry of the fathers, the cry of the children. It doesn't, and this doesn't speak about the Palestinians. It speaks about us. It tells us where our moral compass is. We should be revolted. I was ashamed to be in Italy and see fireworks. Because we shouldn't be celebrating anything. We should be mourning with them what remains of our humanity. And now it's time to mobilize every one of us. I mean, from denouncing if you're a journalist, right? If you're an academic, inform your students. If you are a normal citizen, if you are a worker, try to mobilize your unions to stop, first of all, so that the government stops this, but also, again, that there's not time to words anymore. It's time for action. Really, economic, political, and diplomatic relations with Israel need to be stopped, suspended, until and unless Israel stops to brutalize the Palestinian people, and in Gaza and beyond Gaza.
What you were saying about these double standards is also paralleled with a strange paradox that we're facing, in which Western countries with a colonial history somehow put themselves forward as embodying a special moral gravitas. But does this not simply emphasize the divide between the colonizers and the colonized?
It does, but I think this is the end of it. Now, without commenting on the merit of what the Houthis in Yemen have done, they knew exactly that they would provoke a reaction. But in a way, they have shown that the theory of deterrence, meaning I shock your population so that you don't move, that you stay silent, you stay put where I tell you, doesn't work anymore. South Africa is standing in defiance of the entire West, telling, I don't give a penny. I don't give a penny about what you do or you don't do. Enough. These people have suffered enough. and going to the ICJ. And again, I don't know if the ICJ will pronounce itself on the provisional measures. Of course, they should, because you don't need to determine whether it's genocide or not. But this level of violence, indiscriminate violence against civilians, tells you that there is a risk, and then you recommend provisional measures. Because the system is so rotten, I don't know. But the point is that this is why I say the fact that South Africa has done it already shows that it's that the South doesn't take it anymore. And also look at what's happening. There has never been such a level of mobilization, so global, so massive for weeks, and I suspect it will continue, as it has happened on Gaza these days. And it's in the South, it's in Arab countries, it's in countries which have a lot of issues, and still in the North, because people recognize, standing for justice in Palestine today is not just a matter of justice for the Palestinians, it's also our rights as Europeans who cannot talk, who cannot express themselves, who cannot express dissent, who cannot protest, who cannot demonstrate in the street. And this is where I agree that Palestine is a laboratory. What has been tested on the Palestinians is being now sold as, for example, surveillance technology. This is what countries like this probably buy from Israel. I don't know, but what are they buying from Israel? This is something you need to work out as citizens, because it happens also with your taxes. Not to mention my country, which is just appalling. But however, it's our country. And the thing is that today, there is this huge divide, and people don't want it anymore. Cool? People don't want it anymore. So this is why I was thinking today, it makes sense somewhat. The United Nations Charter, because I really believe in international law. The problem is not with international law. The problem is with politics. And international law without politics is not effective. But as I was saying a few days ago, politics without law can be criminal. So we have to choose where do we stand. But it's we the people. The UN Charter, I don't know why, but say we the people, not we the states or we the nations or we the governments, say we the people. And it's time to act upon that. We the people, eventually we need to be the guarantor of peace and stability. Now it's upon all of us, because what's happening to the people in Gaza becomes a precedent to get rid of people who are not wanted because of their ethnicity, because of whatever. And this is a way to legitimize extermination as accepted methods of war.
You were talking about the bias in media reporting, which we have seen epitomized by the recent decision by major news outlets like BBC and CNN to not broadcast the first day of the hearing at the International Court of Justice, and then to just live stream in full the second day of the hearing when Israel was giving their response. But many people are saying that Israel is losing its media battle. And I was wondering if this is largely related to the use of social media, or we are coming to the point that what is happening can't be hidden anymore. I mean, how many times can one repeat that very well documented accusations of war crimes are just false and obscene?
First of all, I was interviewed for the first time by Haaretz a few days ago, because one thing I would like you to know is that Israelis really don't know. And then, of course, there are social media and they can learn. But we need to think of a society who's been fed for generations with a narrative that, and this is Israeli scholars documenting that. If you are interested in knowing more, there is this Israeli scholar, Nurit Peled, who has written about Palestinians in Israeli textbooks and now how the Holocaust has been manipulated and instrumentalized to feed this narrative that the Palestinians are the enemy, the biggest enemy of the Israelis, because they have plotted. It feels a bit ridiculous to repeat this. Say this. This thing, but that the Palestinians have plotted with Hitler so that Hitler could kill all the Jews, so that the Jews wouldn't go to Palestine, and or that the Palestinians want another Holocaust, or that the Palestinians have come from Arab countries to take the wealth of the Jews. I mean, of course, that this is against history, but they've been fed with this myth that they are. Their paranoia has been created and fed by false myths about what the Palestinians are and want, which is just to live. I don't know, even in peace and enjoying basic rights, just to live. So they do see the Palestinian as the enemy. The Palestinians are so dehumanized in Israeli discourse, and shockingly, this reverberates in the West. Now, again, this is not without precedence, because it's a pattern in the history of Israel-Palestine. But even during genocides, for example, the ICTY, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, insisted on how the media had played a role in covering up for what was happening on massacres, crimes against humanity, concentration camps, etc. It's shocking that it's media in the West. And it's not new. This is why I say we should talk about anti-Palestinian racism, which is a phenomenon, a perimetered phenomenon of its own. I hear people saying, oh, because these countries in the West, there is Islamophobia or there is anti-Arabism. Yes and yes, but anti-Palestinian racism is something that shares a bit with Islamophobia and shares a bit with anti-Arabism, but it's very specific. And think of anti-Semitism, which is also true and still exists. Anti-Semitism is discriminating against the Jewish people because they are Jews. No, so criticizing Israel because of its human rights performance has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It's just simple scrutiny of state performance. But anti-Palestinian racism is the discrimination of Palestinians because as a Palestinian or other people who take a stand on Palestine and can be people of all nationalities, including Jewish people. So it's really like a Orwellian reality, and the media are complicit to a large extent. The fact that you have countries who do not report at all about the reality in Gaza. I was for a couple of weeks in Italy, and I forced myself to watch, like zapping across news media, I mean national media channels at peak hours to see if they were talking of Palestine and what they were saying. And a couple of times I really lost it, because they were celebrating Israeli female soldiers for how valiant they are, how courageous they are, and they go to fight the enemy and fight against terrorism. On another time, the settlers, for God's sake, a journalist going there and interviewing the settlers who were fighting Hamas. Where is Hamas? Excuse me. And so it's really they are creating a parallel reality. It's not just that they are covering up; they are making up facts, and this is why I'm talking in a different countries to sanction this, because this is not normal in democracies, and they are fully complicit.
Yeah. In any case, regardless of what happens at the ICJ, the Israeli authorities have said that they will reject any unfavorable outcome.
Mhm.
So somehow they were overtly dismissing international jurisprudence. And I understand that international law in its current format has been systematized over the past century or so.
Mm.
But there's always been a sense since antiquity that there are rules even within war that shouldn't be violated. You know, in the Iliad, we see Hector go to speak to Achilles to ask to have the dead body of his son returned, to be able to honor and to mourn it properly. And Achilles obviously accepts. So what we're left now is with a strange sense of loss that seems to touch onto something very fundamental about what it is to be human, something very primitive somehow. Because what we are facing is somehow an incredibly emboldened level of violation, like almost impunity with the laughter. So it makes me ask what is happening now to international law as we know it, like what's its future in the face of this level of disregard?
I would remove the word almost impunity, in the sense it's impunity at its best. It's impunity which has fed itself with itself. And in a sense, I understand why Israel has this level of defiance, saying, we'll do whatever we have to do, whatever you say. They've always done it because they've never been held accountable. And when I say never, I mean it. So, and they've always had condemnation, more fierce than now. If you read the General Assembly reports from the 70s or the 80s, Jesus Christ, they were really heavy, telling, oh, Israel is a settler colonial presence and this is a war of aggression and blah, blah. Now we are even concerned of talking of the Palestinians as victims. I mean, if you read even the United Nations, sometimes I see, because I'm an independent expert from the United Nations, so I'm not on the UN payroll, which gives me a lot of freedom. And the price of freedom is priceless. And it's, say the Palestinians are killed. It's a a man-made tragedy. No, these are crimes, and Israel is committing them. So the moment you take Israel out of the equation, you pay them a favor. And it's the story we choose to tell, as I keep on saying, journalists and others. You were going back to the classics, and I remember once I read that in old Athens, hubris was punished more severely than physical damage. Why so? Hubris, the arrogance of being able to commit evil and not apologize for that. Because this is infectious. And it's sort of enable, I never say that, but it's true, institutional bullyism. It's like with a bully. You let the bully behaves as a bully and they will continue to bully. What do you do if you have a child who's a bully? No, I mean, they're not necessarily physical, but you need to reprimand and you need to reorient, lower down to eye, and then say, no, Habibi, you cannot do that. Go back to another pattern, another path. And this is what friendship with Israel would mean, right? Because what Israel is doing, it's not just the end of the Palestinians, it's also the end of Israel as a value system. And I know that because, I mean, there are not many, number-wise, but there are Israelis who are completely devastated, not just because of what they suffered on the 7th of October, but because of what Israel does to the Palestinians through and through. They love Israel somewhat, because Israel has been a safe haven for many. And to give you the sense, to give the Palestinians among you the sense of this, after the Holocaust, no one wanted Jewish people. No one.
not UK, not Australia, not the US. Boats filled with refugees from concentration camps were just pushed back. So this is why, I mean, from a human perspective, I understand those who feel that the state of Israel gave them some protection. But hey, it came at a human cost for another people that after 75 years you could at least acknowledge, for God's sake. Because as an Israeli friend told me recently, we Jewish people have had the opportunity to closure what the Holocaust was for us. To commemorate, to see other commemorating, the Palestinians cannot do that. They're not, people don't even know what the Nakba is. And not only that, they are killed. I mean, this is something that another friend in Australia told me. They are killed, they are blamed, they are smeared. So this is why I say that, yeah, the impunity that has been granted to the Israelis has been like a venom. Because I often say that both people are trapped into an anachronistic system, which is settler colonialism. Both of them are victims somewhat, but of course, no comparison between the suffering of being the dominated ones, the responsibility and the agency that you have when you are in the position of privilege. And but both of them are trapped because you cannot brutalize someone else without losing your humanity in the process. So this is where, yeah, the issue. I mean, this is what the issue boils down to eventually.
Someone is telling me it's time to open to the floor. So maybe we can start. We have Ada Colau here, the former mayor of Barcelona, who, during her mandate, took a strong stance. Yeah, who, during her mandate, took a strong stance in terms of the relationship between Barcelona and Israel. And so I wanted to ask you, Ada, if you can comment about what cities rather than states can do in terms of putting further pressure in terms of ending the genocide. And then, of course, if you have a question for Francesca, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Ma prima tu hai detto non parlare la lingua dell'impero, no? Quindi ti posso parlare in italiano, poi faccio la traduzione breve al catalano se volete. O se no parlo la lingua dell'impero, come volete, come preferite.
No, yo hablo también el idioma del impero, pero tengo vergüenza aquí en Cataluña. No van a hacerlo.
Non so come intervengo, alla fine come intervengo en catalano, español, italiano.
Creo que puede ser en español.
En español quizás, entendéis las dos.
Sí, Francesca entiende, quizás para contestártelo en inglés.
Venga, perfecto, pues hacemos así. Muchas gracias por esta conversación y muchas gracias por tu trabajo, Francesca, siempre tan necesario. El problema de ahora, lo has descrito muy bien, es que se han pasado todas las líneas rojas, todas, las que nos habíamos puesto como humanidad, ¿no? Después del Holocausto, después de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, nos pusimos líneas rojas, nos inventamos Naciones Unidas, el sistema de derechos humanos y todo ha saltado por los aires en Gaza, ¿no? No solo la población palestina, sino todo el sistema que nos hemos dado como humanidad para protegernos. Entonces, eso crea parálisis, impotencia, ¿no? Cuando no hay una reacción de los estados supuestamente democráticos comprometidos con Naciones Unidas y con derechos humanos. Y ahí buscar los puntos de acción, ¿no? De resistencia y acción es muy difícil, porque cuando quienes tienen que ser los garantes del sistema de derechos humanos no reaccionan, parece imposible hacer nada, ¿no? Desde las ciudades lo hemos buscado. Hace un año Barcelona suspendió relaciones con Israel. Hace un año fue por apartheid, ¿no? No, y además compartir brevemente la experiencia de que efectivamente compruebas, siendo solo una ciudad, no un estado, el nivel de presión que existió, ¿no? Nos pusieron querellas penales, o sea, nos denunciaron ante el Tribunal central en Madrid, ¿no? ante la Audiencia Nacional que juzga por terrorismo y por delitos de odio, a mí me pusieron querellas por romper relaciones con Israel, porque efectivamente hay un lobby muy organizado que tiene capacidad de presión a todos los niveles, político, económico, mediático, judicial, ¿no? Y hace un año era por apartheid. Luego hubo un cambio de gobierno, retomaron relaciones, pero después de lo que ha pasado a partir del 7 de octubre, ¿no? y el intento de genocidio que hay ahora mismo, hemos conseguido otra vez suspender relaciones con Israel, ¿no? Y hace poco volvimos a suspender relaciones con Israel, pero no es suficiente. No es suficiente. Entonces, yo te quería preguntar, estamos intentando presionar al Gobierno de España, que se ha posicionado con las palabras, como tú decías, ¿no? retóricamente se ha posicionado y ha criticado la acción del Gobierno de Israel, de las autoridades de Israel, pero hay que pasar a la acción. Entonces, hemos celebrado la querella de Sudáfrica, hemos pedido que el Gobierno de España apoye esa querella, que suspenda relaciones. Y yo te quería preguntar por la cuestión económica, porque finalmente una se pregunta, ¿no? Hemos pedido el embargo de armas, hemos pedido que se sumen a la querella de Sudáfrica, suspender relaciones, y la otra cuestión es la económica, ¿no? Además se habla mucho, ¿no? de la cuestión del gas que está situada frente a Gaza, que también incluso indirectamente tiene que ver con el conflicto en Ucrania, la nueva geopolítica, ¿no? Entonces, ¿hasta qué punto, no sé, si habría que escoger una de las cuestiones, ¿no? si es suspender relaciones para defender el sistema de derechos humanos, hay que todas las instituciones democráticas suspender relaciones y centrarnos en suspender relaciones para aislar al gobierno de Israel? O si es la cuestión económica, al final, en un mundo globalizado, son los actores económicos los que tendrán más capacidad de decir esto hay que terminarlo porque se nos va de las manos, ¿no? Entonces, no sé si efectivamente, y por eso también hay campañas, ¿no? de boicot para incidir en lo que parece que a nivel global ahora mismo está funcionando más. También como ciudades, porque como ciudades y como ciudadanía no podemos interrumpir el tráfico de armas. Podemos apoyar, digamos, simbólicamente la querella de Sudáfrica, pero no tenemos la capacidad de los países, ¿no? Entonces, quizás en el ámbito económico, en cambio, tenemos más capacidad de incidencia los ciudadanos y las ciudades, ¿no? Entonces, era para preguntarte si crees que la cuestión económica es una cuestión también, una palanca importante para jugar la resistencia, ¿no? y apoyar al pueblo de Palestina, que al final es apoyar la causa de la humanidad. Muchas gracias.
Sí.
Muchas gracias. Me honora tu presencia aquí. I do think that all boils down to economic interests. And before, I mean, years ago, I thought, no, maybe it's the way the European states protect Israel is just because they don't know enough. They know everything. Maybe they don't understand everything. They don't feel compelled to change the course of action, but they do understand what Israel is doing, and they do know that it's illegal, profoundly illegal. I do think that there are economic interests, and this is why before the 7th of October, I had already planned to work on businesses and see how, the business, the corporation dimension plays a role in the occupation and in the apartheid regime. And it's the surveillance system, it's the prison system, because it's all fed, there's a lot of connections with, particularly with European businesses and corporations, but also pension funds. So much money of people who put aside some savings for their future in Europe. They don't even know, these people don't even know that this money is used to destroy the present of millions in Palestine. And then digital surveillance and weapons. So there are so many layers of dealings. So it has a huge component, and this is why I think that it's important to mobilize all sectors of the society and the trade unions in particular. Because eventually we should remember that South Africa, the apartheid in South Africa was not brought down. It took 20 years. And it was not brought down by the United Nations member states, who eventually realized how bad the Black Africans were in South Africa. No, and I mean, the United States and the United Kingdoms and Israel made businesses with South Africa until the very end. It was the people. Like it started in Ireland with workers, simple workers, immense human beings who decided, no, we are not going to put South African goods on our markets. So there are different things that need to be done. First of all, I think that it's our responsibility to make space, physical space, for the Palestinians to talk, to tell their history, because they know them better than anyone else, better than the special rapporteurs or all the academics and others. This is first and foremost an act of recognition of their dignity as people who have the floor to speak and denounce. And then to really mobilize as municipalities. Also, I see these people mobilizing grassroots level everywhere, and it's so wonderful and it's so commendable. Please continue to do so and think that you can do more. I mean, I know that tomorrow there will be the largest protests ever called in Spain. 100 cities who are mobilizing for that. Please do join and encourage others to join, because physically your presence count, and you need. And then demonstrations. Like, now it's not time for normal action, whatever, all peaceful, but still there are things that need to be broken. Like, cannot be normal. So whatever, I cannot say civil disobedience. Oh my God, the special rapporteurs are calling for insurrections. No, I'm just saying, if we act as normal, we normalize this. So we cannot. So South Africa has been bombastic, using judicial mechanisms. I feel ashamed that it had to be South Africa to do that and not Spain, while Spain didn't do that, or Belgium, or Ireland. So again, it takes courage. Now, look inside yourself and say, what I can do with my means, as a journalist, as a university student, as a mayor. Use whatever you do, give full space to your creativity within the limits of the law. And do that, because it's about the Palestinians, but it's about all of us. All of us. All of us are dying. Some of us is dying if we keep on leaving the Palestinians alone right now.
We have someone here.
Thank you so much, Isabel and Francesca, for a very enlightening conversation. And I want to bring back something that you, Francesca, mentioned at the beginning of your intervention, and that made me very curious. You talked about unexplored avenues within international law. And like you, I do believe that it's not international law that's lacking, it's actually the political will to enforce it, basically. But the truth is that throughout the years, we've seen that legal recourse has taken Palestinians basically nowhere. So yeah, I'm talking about hundreds of UN resolutions, even the ICJ advisory opinion on the building of the wall, lots of things. And moreover, we're looking at an architecture of international law that's basically crumbling, and it's been destroyed, systematically destroyed by the same states that built it in the first place. Just yesterday, we had the novel, very young French Minister of Foreign Affairs declaring that France would actually not, if the ICJ ruled in favor of South Africa in this process, France would basically disregard the ICJ ruling. I don't know if you read it, but it was on the news yesterday by a very novel, very young guy. So I'm quite curious. Can you talk us through what's out there, what's left in international law? How can the global South, and I'm talking about the global South because I come from the global South, actually reclaim international law to make it work for a really just new world order?
Yeah, no, there are two things here. First of all, international law is a product of states. I mean, states have regulated their relationship through international law. But there is a wonderful part in international law that is not just a gift that states made to us, and it's human rights law. Yes, it's a codification of human conquests, and it's the anti-slavery movement, the movement for women equality, for voting rights for women. It's the movement of los campesinos que ha ganado derechos así, luchando. And also the movements against the fascism. So no, it's our conquest that they have recognized when they lost everything, when they realized that states could collapse after two world wars in not even 40 years' time, 30 years' time. So, no, eventually it boils down to people. We need to recognize the rights of the people. So human rights is our instruments, and human rights either are for all or for none. They are very different from privileges. And the thing is that what France said is just, I can disregard international law because no, the International Court of Justice decisions are binding. And if you think that you can disregard with impunity, you believe that you are above the law. So it's the responsibility of the citizens to say you cannot do that, because if you do, everyone can do that. So again, the arrogance of all this is not surprising, because I often say, who says that? Who can say that? France or Germany? The guts of Germany. Namibia. Have you seen the response of Namibia?
So good.
Yes. Is this recorded? Don't provoke me. Don't provoke the leftist. He does that. Yeah. Namibia, was fantastic to see Namibia slapping Germany, saying, because Germany goes no against South Africa for trying to prevent a genocide in the making, and then Germany says, no, we will stand against South Africa. And then you have Namibia saying, you have not atoned yet for the first genocide you committed in history, which is against the Herero people. Germany is still to pay and to acknowledge what it has done to Herero people and has the guts to tell South Africa what to do. Hey, no. And this is our responsibility as societies who have colonized. And I was telling, Spain, I'm sorry, but Spain started all this. For those who have not read it, because the way I learned about colonization was reading Las Vienas Abiertas de las América Latina. So, genocide is not an exception in settler colonial societies. Genocide is not an exception in colonialism. Maybe most genocides happened when the human rights consciousness had not had not been codified, had not codified anything yet, but still, this is history. So I do think that it makes sense to talk about that in Spain, so to have Spanish people reclaiming that space to atone for the past. So yeah, I think it's that. Sometimes I get carried away and then I lose the train. La respuesta es que no, le he dicho que no es aceptable. No es aceptable, es lo que...
Sabemos que hay una ley que está justificando una ocupación militar, la ha dicho usted. Hay una ley internacional que, como ha dicho usted, está
Gracias. Sí, me
perfecto, que está
Sí.
justificando ocupación militar y ha dado el artículo exacto que justifica cuando un Estado, no por defensa, por amenaza, puede ocupar. Muy bien. Y entonces, cuando un Estado, quiero decir, la ley internacional, ¿qué puede hacer? Claro, aquí la gente dice nada.
No
¿Qué
es verdad.
puede hacer
Gracias.
¿Qué
me
puede
olvidé.
hacer la ley internacional para frenar, para sancionar estados que no cumplen con todo esto? Porque que usted cuenta todo lo que ha contado hasta ahora, yo estoy enamorado de su visión. Pero su visión como experta de la United Nations, como experta independiente, por favor, ¿me puede dar una opinión importante? Porque que usted me dice los ciudadanos se deben movilizar, deben salir a la calle. Yo lo hago y todos lo hacen, pero luego si por vuestra parte, aunque usted sea independiente y no tenga una voz importante desde el punto de vista político, pero si no llega una movilización interna a los palacios, nosotros, ¿qué coño hacemos movilizándonos en la calle?
Espera. No, there is one, and thank you very much for
Y
bringing me back.
perdona si le
Sí.
interrumpo. Una curiosidad.
Sí.
Como experto en comunicación audiovisual, me interesaría saber, si puede, cuando da una información, dar una fuente, que en Italia hay una controversia o controvertida o extraña información que se da sobre el conflicto en Palestina y Israel. Me interesaría saber qué programas usted ha visto, porque yo he visto muchos programas y veo muchos programas donde se da voz a ambas partes. En Italia. Sí.
Hay un programa donde se da...
¿La secta
No
la
hay
conoce?
ambas partes. ¿Qué es ambas partes?
Ah.
¿Qué entiendes?
Porque
Disculpa.
usted antes ha dicho que en Italia, como en Italia haciendo zapping entre los programas, ha visto que se hablaba de algo a favor de Israel.
No, se hablaba de los soldados que están defendiendo...
Sí, esta era la curiosidad, pero poco importa la pregunta que yo había hecho, porque de todas formas, antes, cuando ha dicho esto, era importante también dar una fuente y
El
decir...
TG1.
Era el TG1, bien, entonces puede ser una información manipulada como la puede ser de la 1 o de la BBC o de la CNN.
Sí, hay.
Entonces, perfecto, pero hay también, por suerte, otros programas y otros canales que dan una información completa. Esto era para acabar con la curiosidad. Pero, volviendo a la pregunta, que me importa saberlo, ¿cómo nosotros podemos...
Los medios. There is a very important point, because I said there are avenues that have not been explored enough. And again, international law is there as a lighthouse to differentiate between what is permitted and what is not permitted, because between what is right and what is wrong. And then also establish sanctions for states, diplomatic, economic, and political measures. When it's too much, there is also armed interventions. We are not going there. But then the criminal responsibility for individuals who are responsible for atrocities, meaning war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Unexplored avenues are national courts. And I know that national courts are seen as not an avenue, because they've been, even in Spain, I understand that the law of universal jurisdiction was changed so as to narrow the possibilities to use it against war criminals when they come from certain countries. This is how they constrain your possibilities to seek for justice. Still, domestic courts are fundamental and are being used as we speak more and more. And this is something I've invested a lot before becoming a special rapporteur. So really thinking how we can use our domestic systems to bring to justice companies companies who are registered in Spain and are involved in the occupation. The occupation is so illegal. So my work, for example, is important to establish a official record of the legality of the occupation. And if you have seen how much South Africa has relied on the work of special rapporteurs, including myself, to build their case, you understand what I mean. We are a source, we are an official source to establish the facts, but also for the legal qualifications. We not a source of law, but our advice counts, as the South African case proves. So there are cases that can be brought against businesses involved in the occupation or currently in the genocide, and I talk of businesses. Again, I cannot speak of concrete cases because I do not know, but this is the work that you can do at the national level. Or also soldiers. Again, I'm surprised of how many countries allow their own citizens to serve in the Israeli army. Indeed, I thought it was just England. And no, there is also Australia and apparently Spain as well. So these are things that, or settlers. There are many settlers who are Europeans. I don't know how many are Spanish, but there is a huge French community, are huge Belgian communities, and together with Americans who are there as settlers. These are things that need to be known because this is something that can be acted upon. So settlers organizations who have, again, European ties, or I don't know, but this is something that needs to be investigated. And then, so this is why I say now, if you go always after the prime minister or the commander-in-chief, it's more difficult. But armed settlers and the Palestinians and Israelis human rights organizations document all the violations, most of the violations that take place against Palestinians as part of the apartheid regime. So this is where national courts become fundamental, because you can bring cases against violations of, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide is going to be more difficult. But so you can activate these courts for the pursuit of justice, and it's much more difficult to defend like armed settlers or to defend companies than to defend, to protect the prime minister. It shouldn't be like that, but it is. And you can see that it's already starting. Today, I saw a case in Switzerland. There are cases in Belgium. There are cases. So these are things that you have an history also with Pinochet. So more can be done at this level. This is what I meant when I say unexplored avenues.
Someone there.
Hi, on the subject of settling. Hi, I'm here.
Oh, hi.
Sorry. Is this recorded? Is this recorded?
Or is it?
No, but not outside.
Don't
Okay.
worry, I've done it all. So it would be all on me.
I've been to Jerusalem, and through surreal events, I was invited to join day with a settler organization, an extremist settler organization. Sorry. So I think, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Don't worry. Take your time. No, it's okay. Another question, and maybe if you feel like asking the question or just sharing later, feel free. It's a space of compassion here.
We have someone down there. Nadia.
Hello. Thank you, Isabel and Francesca. I have two questions. Is that okay? They go with one another. So as around the term conflict is something that I heard for years through books and medias, and I'm not quite agree with the term, so there's my question. Why is it challenging to reframe for the West, reframe the Palestinian-Israeli situation as liberation movement, considering the evidence of power and imbalance and the absence of comparable resources between the Palestinian and the Israeli occupation forces. The second question goes with, does labeling the Palestinian-Israel situation as conflict advertently contribute to misleading the narrative and the obscure power, asymmetry, and frame as an equal struggle between two states, rather than acknowledging the systematic challenge faced by the Palestinian and faced by the Israeli dominances?
Yeah, I do use the term conflict, but also helped by my Italian ancestry, conflict. It's a conflict because there is a war clearly, but it cannot be, it's not now it's funny for lack of better words. In Italy, I'm invited to talks about the war in the Middle East. And then I see all Palestinians, Israelis, speakers and me. So are we going to talk about Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, whatever? Or are we going to talk about Palestine? Because if it's about Palestine, let's make a conflict, whatever you want to call it, in Palestine. And then, it's a misnomer. So either you use it as a proper qualification or it distracts from the reality on the ground, which is a settler colonial reality that is punctuated by conflicts. There have been 5 wars in Gaza, as I already mentioned, in 16 years, a blockade, which is a war crime in itself. The former prosecutor of the ICC, Luis Moreno Ocampo, said that the very creation of the blockade is genocidal. So, I'm not dismissing the word conflict, but it is to be qualified. And yes, it's used in everything. It's used in the West in a way to deflect the reality and the heinous aspects of it. Because in fact, even when I hear parties, like if it was a contract of no, it's not. It gives a false sense of equivalence that doesn't exist, because the relationship, as I said, the first time I had the chance to speak at the United Nations, I said it's the relationship. It's still that between an occupier, an occupying power, and an occupied. And we should remember that, because Israel, as an occupying power, has duties and responsibilities toward the Palestinians, which instead it considers as an enemy, as an hostile entity, as an hostile population. And this narrative deflects against the reality and allows us to treat the Palestinians as they are considered by Israel. Look at the dehumanization in the narrative. Human shields, all terrorists. This is the language that the ICJ Israel used to defend itself. But I also find it so weak as a defense and so self-incriminating that it should tell us where we are. So yes, in this sense, they are losing as you were saying, as Isabel was saying, they are losing this image, this moral compass that Israel has always held. So we should use the language to fight against a very pernicious enemy, the epistemic violence, the violence of the language, because it's not just hegemony. I've always forget the name of the brilliant scholar who has coined this term epistemic violence, but hegemony doesn't only express itself in forms of domination through conflict or through economic means, but also the way we tell history, the way we tell the story of what's going on. So in this sense, settler colonialism for me remains the most honest way to portray the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians. And then, of course, it's a conflict, but not a conflict between two equal parties. It's an occupying power which practices apartheid and other crimes. and a people who tries to defend itself just to live and to enjoy its right of self-determination. So this is why for the Palestinians, it's clear that their very existence right now is a form of resistance, and it is to be acknowledged, I think.
Am I right? There's one more? Yeah?
It's me again.
I have someone very conveniently sat in the front.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there was... okay, the one that was...
I am Niveen from Palestine. I just came yesterday from Palestine, from a very hard situation, a disaster situation. I would like to thank you first for that she talked in our voice and you explained our daily life, our daily disaster life. So thank you, Francesca, for explaining and for talking in our voice. Please, I would like to ask you always to continue raising your voice so as to make a change maybe in our land. Also, because your support, it's really very crucial for us as a Palestinian, especially during this very, very hard situation that we are facing in our land. And standing with Palestinian, I think, is also standing with human rights and also standing with with international law. Because I tell you the truth that we as Palestinian, we lost the faith and the trust in the international law, unfortunately. I'm working in women's organizations that we are working with rights and with the human rights and with the women's rights. And we are asked by all the people and all the beneficiaries that we are working with, where are the rights that you were always talking about? Where is the international law that you are... Thank you. Where is the international law that they are looking at us without acting anything? So we are, as an organization, we don't have an answer because really it's speechless and it's we can't act anything. So we know that we are humans and we want to live. We are not terrorists and we love lives. And we are a Palestinian that we don't put our children, like they said, as a human shelters. Imagine your land is being taken. It's normally, I mean, the act that they did it on the 7th of October, it doesn't come from nothing. We are surviving for more than 75 years old. There is, as she said, Gaza, they are under siege and they are living in a very, very, very bad situation. I can tell you a thousand of daily stories that we are facing every day. You can't imagine how we live until you come to Palestine and you see the exact daily life that we are facing. They enter anytime. They arrested a lot of people. They demolished houses every day. They put checkpoints. We are living in like a blocks. We can't move from here to another place in a safe. We are asking that we are humans, that we should live in a safe place. We are not terrorists. We are asking for our rights. And it's our land, and we are fighting for our lands. And we didn't took their rights. And thank you for supporting us, and thank you for your commitment. Thank you.
So there's the person that was going to ask a question before.
Okay, I will try again. Hi. I was in Jerusalem. I will try to take the personal part out of it because the release of it's like anyway. On the subject of settler organizations, which are the word is very mild. Organization. It's not an organization. I think we are not informed in Europe enough how they work. I think the videos that we see of the one guy with a gun is not how settling works. This is just one part of it. There are many ways that they do it so they cannot be, there will not be videos like this. You know how settler organizations work. They are funded by people in Europe and people in the US. And I think it's very important for us to be educated on that because this is something we can act on now. I know we can demonstrate and we can ask for the genocide in Gaza to stop, but at the same time, what's happening in East Jerusalem and the West Bank is something also we can work on if we educate ourselves enough so we can push our politicians. Anyways, maybe you can help with that. That's the point.
There is something that it's very difficult for me is to meet the eyes of Palestinians these days. And I've been receiving messages, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from people who were in tents in Gaza. And I can tell you the feeling of shame. Because if there is one thing I've not done since the beginning of this new horror, is to talk to my Palestinian friends. Because I'm ashamed. And I keep on saying, don't say thank you to me, because the moment you say thank you, something inside me explodes. And I mean, I really felt, there was a moment where you were speaking, I felt unwell. Because it's, I mean, I should tell thank you somewhat for being so gracious and so gentle, while the world is just so vicious to you. And there is just one way to explain to those who have never been to Palestine what the Palestinians people are. And there's a journalist, not even me, I keep on repeating things that have been said by others, but it's the miracle of kindness. This is what the Palestinians are. Kind human beings. I don't even know how they manage. I don't even know how you manage to be so gracious and so kind. Don't thank me because I'm doing what I should do, what we, all decent human beings should do. And they do. They do. I hope you see how many people are standing. Yeah, I have a voice. And I use that voice because this is who I am as a people. I've never liked bullies when I was a child, and I don't like bullies today. This is the only thing, it's my nature, but there's nothing special about what I'm doing. And yeah, I will continue, no worries. I'm here, and I will, with so many, I'll continue. Maybe what I do differently is that, like a bee, I travel across places and I do see how we can work better together, bringing together energy, but now everything doesn't look enough. Doesn't look enough because it's not just about stopping the settlers. It's stopping a machinery that, as a 972 called it, it's an assassination factory. So while people in Europe are still consumed in their two-state solution now, the two-state solution, guys, are you serious? It's so insulting right now. Right now, let's stop the genocide. First, let's stop the genocide. Second, we try to figure out how Gaza can still be a place for the Palestinians to live, because still, they've destroyed 70%. Imagine Barcelona, 70% of Barcelona gone. And there is nothing, places of love, places of life, from the
the promenade to the shops and the kebab places and restaurants and houses with clothes, with pictures, with books, with luggages. Everything is gone. So how is this place going to be rebuilt? How these human beings, when we will have the courage to look into their eyes, how can we help them? We can help them. If we have done this, if the Jewish people have recovered from what we have done to them, you Palestinians can recover. And there is something interesting. I met a Palestinian scholar who's been teaching in an Italian university, and I was saying, being really me, oh my God, how the day after? For me, the day after is, I don't know when it will happen, but how you Palestinians will forgive for all what has happened to you, all what has been done to you. And you say, I don't understand, we are Muslim, we don't seek for revenge. We'll be able to cope, we'll be able to live in peace. We have to be allowed to live. And I think this is so true. So another thing is the responsibility we have as human beings to challenge this very vicious narrative that is spread all over in our societies of fearing the other just because it's different. And I realized, as he told me that, I reproduce my Western bias, my Western paranoia. And if me, Francesca Albanese, has it, imagine the others who are naturally racist and have not coped with their racism. They have not unpacked their racism. So we have a lot of responsibilities. And I totally agree that we don't know a thing. Western societies do not know a thing about who the settlers now in the West Bank are. Because I've even known things that I didn't know before. We think of settlers like, especially the violent, the armed ones, as something extraneous, something that has grown abnormal. No. Settlements are really entrenched into the Israel state system. In fact, the security, the reason why we see settlers and the army always going together, it's by design. Because the army take instructions there is always one person in the settlement who's paid by the Minister of Defense to coordinate security. This is former soldiers who tell us. Breaking the Silence has written it down for us, so we cannot say we don't know. We just don't want to know. But and then the army, these young people, 18, 19, go there, and they don't know a thing about the Wild West Bank. So they just fear the Palestinians. But then there are the settlers who welcome them, who give them food, who treat them well. They say they are very dangerous, but no worries, you're just here to protect us. And they do. They protect them. And they work, and so their presence is a way to gain more land that then is recognized some way or another, little by little, by the state of Israel. And then it's very violent the way they take houses one by one, through all means, to the legal system that Israel has built. For example, Palestinians cannot build in the Yeah. Yes, that's true. Correct. Cannot build, and they cannot even renovate, or cannot do anything to change. So as they grow in numbers, they cannot even accommodate themselves into. Sometimes they build a top layer on the house, and then another one, and Israel orders the demolition of the house. It's so brutal, really. It's so brutal. And when it's not demolished, there is always a way to take away houses. Now from Jerusalem, the evacuation orders on families that they have to give back the home on the ground of deeds from centuries ago. and there is no possibility to appeal. So this is why I say it's a spurious debate whether we label in European markets settlement goods. Settlement goods shouldn't be in our market, on our markets, full stop, because they emanate from war crimes. But let me be also a little bit more international law compliant. Because this is it's not a settlement enterprise separated from the state. This is part of Israel's state. Yes, it's the part of the expansion. So Israel should be sanctioned for that. It's the state of Israel. We should pay for what it has done and it continues to do to the Palestinians. So, I mean, boycotting settlement products is just a mild way of dealing with it. But now, with a genocide unfolding, the state of Israel needs to face these measures as a state. So it's not just settlement products, it's the state of Israel who should face boycott, divest, and sanction. I mean, sorry, it doesn't sound very radical, but Russia, Ukraine, did we... I don't know, because I've not lived in Europe for a long time, but did we only boycott the products that came from Crimea, or did we boycott Russian products? Russian products, right? So it's just about being coherent with the way we apply international law.
Thank you, Francesca. I think we're unfortunately run out of time. So I would like to thank Lydia Ourahmane for inviting us, and MACBA for hosting, and for being here, and obviously Francesca. Thank you so much.